Hey everyone, we've got a really interesting deep dive lined up today, all about psychological pain and psychogenic pain and pain disorder. It's kind of fascinating stuff, right? I mean, these terms all kind of sound the same, but I'm betting there are some pretty important distinctions.
Oh, you're definitely right about that. It can get kind of confusing pretty fast. It's a bit like the Bermuda Triangle of pain, actually. Psychological pain. That's basically the emotional distress that we all feel, that ache of grief, the sting of rejection, that heavy weight of sadness we feel sometimes. It's all very real, but it's coming from emotional sources, not physical ones.
So it's that feeling of being hurt, but not in a physical way.
Oh,
Like you
yeah.
can't point to where it hurts on your
It
body.
got it. And then we have psychogenic pain, which is where the mind-body connection gets super interesting. That's when that emotional distress you were talking about turns into physical pain. For real. Like you might get a backache when you're stressed, but the doctor can't find anything wrong with your back, like a slipped disc or anything.
So it's like our emotions are trying to find a way to express themselves physically.
That's a great way to think about it. And then there's pain disorder, which is a real diagnosed condition where chronic pain that lasts for 6 months or more, is really heavily influenced by psychological factors. So say someone was in a car accident years ago and their physical injuries are healed, but they're still in a lot of pain. Those signals are real, but the root of the problem is more psychological.
So someone with pain disorder could be more likely to experience psychogenic pain too, since their emotional state is so tied to their physical pain.
You're right on the money with that one. There is often a lot of overlap. In fact, some researchers actually believe that unresolved emotional conflicts, especially ones that go all the way back to childhood, can end up manifesting as physical pain later on in life.
Whoa. So you mean something like childhood trauma could actually lead someone to develop chronic pain as an adult?
There's definitely more and more evidence to support that theory. Think about it. When a child doesn't have the words or the ability to express their distress, their body might take over and start expressing it physically through stomach aches or headaches.
So it's like their body's trying to send a signal that something's wrong.
Exactly. And that can absolutely carry over into adulthood, particularly if those early life experiences lead to a pattern of avoiding emotions or feeling like it's not safe to be vulnerable. And sometimes these patterns get so ingrained that the person might not even realize the connection between their past experiences and their current pain.
So even if someone doesn't consciously remember the specific traumatic event, their body could still be carrying the memory and expressing it as pain.
Exactly right. And that just shows you how complex pain can be. It's not always a simple equation of injury equals pain. There's almost always a layer of emotional and psychological factors involved too.
That makes you wonder how much of the chronic pain that people experience is rooted in emotional distress that hasn't been dealt with, especially given how common childhood trauma is.
It really highlights how important it is to approach pain management holistically. We need to look at both the physical and the psychological aspects of someone's pain.
So how do doctors even begin to figure out what's going on when it comes to physical versus emotional pain? Diagnosing something like psychogenic pain or pain disorder has got to be super tricky.
You telling me? It's a very careful process. The first step is always to do a complete medical evaluation to rule out any underlying medical condition. We can't miss anything obvious.
So you kind of have to play process of elimination first and make sure there's no physical reason for the pain.
Yeah, and if all the physical exams and tests come back normal, then the focus shifts to psychological assessment. So that involves looking at a person's emotional health, their stress levels, their coping strategies, their personal history, and any history of trauma.
You got to look at the whole person, not just their symptoms, because their pain is valid, regardless of whether there's a straightforward physical cause or not.
Exactly. And the doctor's empathy and understanding are crucial here. The person needs to feel safe and heard and not dismissed or told, it's all in your head.
Building that trust and rapport must be really hard, especially if they've experienced trauma in the past or had doctors dismiss them before.
It's definitely delicate, but when that connection is there and the person feels truly understood, that's when the real healing can begin.
So once a diagnosis of psychogenic pain or pain disorder is made, what are the best ways to treat these conditions?
Well, it usually involves a multi-pronged approach. We want to target the actual physical pain as well as the underlying psychological factors that might be contributing to it.
So it's not just about masking the pain with medication. It's about tackling it from all sides.
Exactly. Think of it like a garden. You can pull out the weeds to address the symptoms, but if you don't get to the root cause, those weeds are just going to keep coming back. Psychotherapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, is often a big part of treatment.
Yeah, I've heard that CBT can be super helpful for a lot of mental health issues. How does it help with pain management, though?
It's really effective. CBT helps people understand the link between their thoughts, their emotions, and their experience of pain. They learn to identify and challenge negative thought patterns, they come up with coping skills to manage pain flare-ups, and they gradually start doing activities they might have been avoiding because of fear.
So it's not about getting rid of the pain completely, but rather helping the person live a fulfilling life despite the pain.
You got it. And that's where things get really interesting because research is showing that the brain is incredibly adaptable. We can actually retrain the brain to perceive and respond to pain differently through therapies like CBT.
Really, so even if the pain signals are still there, the person's experience of those signals can change.
Exactly. They develop a sense of control over their pain instead of feeling helpless. And that change in perspective can be huge.
It's like learning to speak the language of pain management, and that empowers them to actively participate in their own healing.
Love that analogy. That feeling of control is critical because it helps to break down the stigma and shame that so often comes with psychogenic pain.
And speaking of stigma, I think it's how we talked about that head on. This idea that psychogenic pain is all in your head and therefore not real is so damaging and can really prevent people from getting help.
You're absolutely right. It's a myth that needs to be busted. All pain, regardless of where it comes from, is processed and experienced by the brain. So in a way, all pain is in your head, whether it's from a broken bone or a broken heart.
That's such a good point. So it's not about whether the pain is real or imagined. It's recognizing that the brain is where all pain is processed and that emotional distress can trigger those pain pathways just as easily as a physical injury can.
Exactly. And for people who are experiencing psychogenic pain, it's really important to remember that this doesn't make them weak or less deserving of support. It just means that their pain is coming from a different place.
It's about validating their experience,
Yes.
acknowledging that their suffering is real, and making sure they have the tools and resources they need to manage their pain effectively.
Absolutely. And it's about shifting our societal perspectives. So we view mental and emotional well-being as just as important as physical health. They deserve the same attention and care.
I love that. It's about recognizing that true health and well-being means looking at the whole person, not just their physical body.
Exactly. And that holistic view is essential when it comes to understanding and treating psychogenic pain because it acknowledges that intricate dance between the mind, the body, and the person's lived experience.
Well, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this incredibly complex topic. What else will we be uncovering as we continue our deep dive into the world of psychogenic pain?
It really is like going on an adventure, isn't it? As we learn more, we'll see how psychogenic pain affects more than just the immediate feeling of pain. It can enter a person's whole life.
Beyond the pain itself, you mean how it affects their daily life?
Yes, exactly. Imagine dealing with constant pain. It's exhausting and frustrating and limits what you can do. It makes it harder to work, to socialize, to even just enjoy the simple things in life. Sleeping becomes a battle, hobbies get forgotten, and relationships get strained. It's tough.
That sounds incredibly isolating.
It definitely can be. And that's why recognizing it early and getting help is so important. You don't want to wait until someone's life is completely falling apart before offering support.
So it's not just about reducing the pain, it's about helping people get their lives back and feel normal again.
Exactly. And that's where that multidisciplinary approach we talked about really comes in. Combining things like therapy, medication, and lifestyle changes can give people the tools to manage their symptoms and start living a more fulfilling life.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this is much more than just simple pain management.
Yeah.
It's almost like relearning how to live in your own body.
What a great way to put it. It really does come back to the idea that the body is trying to tell us something that our mind hasn't quite processed yet.
Earlier, we talked about childhood trauma as a possible cause. Are there other types of emotional distress that might manifest as psychogenic pain?
Absolutely. It could be any deeply buried emotion like grief that we haven't allowed ourselves to fully feel, anger that we've bottled up for years, or in intense guilt or shame. If these emotions aren't expressed in a healthy way, they can build up and eventually show up as physical pain.
So it's not just major traumatic events, but also all the everyday emotional stresses that pile up over time.
Yes, definitely. And a person's personality and coping style can also play a role. Someone who always puts others' needs before their own and bottles up their own feelings might be more likely to experience psychogenic pain because they don't have healthy ways to express those needs.
Makes you wonder if people in certain professions like caregivers, who are always giving but not receiving much support themselves, might be more prone to psychogenic pain too.
That's a great point, and it's something researchers are actually looking into. But regardless of the triggers, the key is to address the emotional root of the pain and not just the symptoms.
So let's talk more about how that's done in therapy. We talked about CBT before, but can you go a little deeper into how it's used specifically for someone dealing with psychogenic pain?
Sure, it's almost like being a detective. The therapist acts as a guide, helping the person uncover those buried emotions and the thought patterns and behaviors that are contributing to their pain. They might explore past traumas, practice techniques to be more assertive so they can better express their needs, or challenge those deeply ingrained beliefs about themselves that might be fueling the pain.
So it's like rewiring their emotional responses.
That's a great way to think about it. And it's not about blaming themselves or dwelling on the past. The goal is to understand those patterns so they can break free and learn healthier ways of coping.
So instead of just passively receiving treatment, they become an active participant in their own healing.
Exactly. They're empowered to make changes and take charge of their well-being.
What about medication? Is it just for pain relief, or does it play a bigger role?
That's a tricky one. While antidepressants can definitely help reduce pain, we have to be careful about just masking the underlying emotional issues.
Right, it goes back to treating the root cause,
Yeah.
not just the symptoms. So medication should be a supplement to the work being done in therapy, not a replacement for it.
Exactly. It can provide some relief, which can allow the person to engage more fully in therapy and start making those lifestyle changes that are ultimately going to lead to long-term healing.
And what kind of lifestyle changes can people make to help themselves recover from psychogenic pain?
It's all about creating a foundation of well-being. Regular exercise, eating a balanced diet, getting enough sleep, all of these things help regulate stress, improve mood, and build resilience.
Like building up your defenses against the pain from the inside out.
I love that image. And finding healthy ways to manage stress is key too, like practicing mindfulness, spending time in nature, anything that helps create a sense of calm and connection.
Okay, this is starting to feel much more holistic. It's not just about what happens in therapy. It's about how the person chooses to live their life as a whole.
That's it. And that feeling of choice, of being able to take action, is really empowering, especially when dealing with something that can feel so overwhelming and out of control.
So far, we've mostly been talking about the individual's experience, but I want to shift gears a bit and talk about how psychogenic pain affects people socially. Like, how does it impact relationships, work life, that sense of belonging?
That's such an important piece of the puzzle. Chronic pain, no matter where it comes from, affects more than just the person experiencing it. Imagine trying to explain pain that no one can see and how frustrating it is to be disbelieved or dismissed.
It must be so hard to be around people who don't understand what you're going through. It's like carrying this invisible weight with you everywhere you go.
That's a really good way to describe it.
Yeah.
And that weight can put a lot of strain on even the strongest relationships. Loved ones might get frustrated or impatient because they don't know how to help. Work becomes a constant struggle to meet expectations while dealing with this invisible pain. It's really tough.
So it's not just about the person with the pain learning to cope. It's also about educating the people around them and building a more understanding and supportive environment.
Absolutely. And that's where being open and talking about psychogenic pain is so important. The more we talk about it and normalize it, the more we can break down the stigma and build empathy.
It's about building bridges of understanding instead of walls of isolation.
Beautifully put. And those bridges can lead to a real change in how we as a society approach pain and suffering.
It's about understanding that true health and well-being go beyond just the absence of disease. It's about having support understanding and a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And that's so important when it comes to creating a world where people with psychogenic pain feel seen, heard, and empowered to live full and meaningful lives.
Okay, so we've talked about the personal and social aspects, but what role does research play in all of this? Is there hope for new treatments or even a cure on the horizon?
Research is constantly helping us learn more about psychogenic pain, which is super exciting. One really interesting area is the brain's role in how we process and experience pain.
We were talking earlier about how the brain is basically the control center for all types of pain. Are researchers getting any closer to figuring out exactly how psychogenic pain shows up in the brain?
Yes, and it's fascinating. New brain imaging technology allows us to actually see the brain in action and pinpoint the specific areas that light up when someone experiences pain, whether it's physical or emotional. This is helping us understand the neural pathways involved in psychogenic pain, which opens up the possibility of developing more targeted treatments.
So instead of just treating the symptoms, we might be able to actually target the specific brain circuits that aren't working properly.
You got it. Think of it like rewiring faulty wiring in a house. And that's not all that's not ball. Scientists are also studying the use of biofeedback techniques where people can learn to consciously control their body's responses, including how they perceive pain.
So they're basically taking control of their own nervous system.
Exactly. And that feeling of being in control is so empowering. It gives them agency over their pain instead of feeling helpless.
What about new medications? Are there any promising developments in that area?
There's a lot of research going on right now looking at medications that target specific neurotransmitters involved in pain processing. And there's growing interest in using psychedelics like psilocybin to potentially rewire those pain pathways and provide lasting relief.
Wow, that's fascinating. So research is really pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible when it comes to treating psychogenic pain.
Definitely. And it's not just about new medications or fancy therapies either. Research is also showing us how effective more holistic approaches like mindfulness-based interventions and yoga can be.
So we're seeing a blend of ancient wisdom and modern science.
Exactly. And that's really exciting because it suggests a more integrated and personalized approach to pain management, one that acknowledges the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit.
It's about recognizing that true healing involves the whole person, not just their symptoms.
Well said. And that understanding is at the heart of all the most promising research happening today.
Now, I want to bring up something that's often overlooked when we talk about health conditions, but it's so important, especially when someone is dealing with chronic pain.
I'm curious. Tell me more.
I'm talking about empathy and compassion.
Empathy and compassion. Those are essential for healing and well-being, especially when you're facing chronic pain.
It's about being as kind, understanding, and supportive to yourself as you would be to a friend who's going through a hard time.
Exactly. Instead of criticizing ourselves for our pain or feeling ashamed of our limitations, we can choose to be gentle and accepting of ourselves.
It's recognizing that pain is part of being human, and it doesn't make us weak or unworthy.
You got it. We all experience pain at some point in our lives, and it's important to remember that we're not alone in our suffering.
So how can someone practice self-compassion when you're dealing with chronic pain?
Start by paying attention to how you talk to yourself about your pain. Are you being kind and supportive or critical and judgmental?
It's about becoming aware of that negative self-talk and challenging those thoughts.
Right. And then you can start to replace those negative thoughts with more compassionate and encouraging ones. Instead of thinking, I'm so weak for feeling this pain, try saying, it makes sense that I'm hurting given what I've been through.
It's about recognizing that your pain is valid and doesn't make you any less worthy or capable as a person.
Exactly. And remember, healing takes time. There will be good days and bad days. And on those tough days, self-compassion is what gets you through. It reminds you that you're not alone and that you have the strength to keep going.
It's like being your own best friend, giving yourself the same love and support you would give to someone you care about.
Perfectly put. Having that inner source of love and support can make a huge difference in how you cope with the challenges of psychogenic pain.
Well, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface of this incredibly complex and fascinating topic. But as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways. What were the most important things you learned about psychogenic pain?
For me, it's the power of the mind-body connection. We've seen how emotional distress can actually turn into physical pain, but also how we can use our minds to change how we experience pain. It's a two-way street.
It's a good reminder that real healing means addressing both the physical and psychological parts of pain. It's not one or the other.
I completely agree. The other important thing, I think, is the importance of feeling validated and having compassion. Whether it's from yourself or from other people, it's crucial to remember that psychogenic pain is real, and people who experience it deserve understanding and support.
It's about making the world a place where people feel safe talking about their pain without being judged or dismissed.
Well said. And that starts with each of us challenging our own beliefs about pain and working to make the world a more compassionate and supportive place.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today. I feel like we've all learned so much about this condition that's often misunderstood.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to keep learning about psychogenic pain on their own.
And remember, if you're dealing with chronic pain, you're not alone. There are resources and support systems out there to help you cope and find healing. Reach out, connect with others, and know that you are worthy of care and support.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop believing in your ability to heal.
That's a great place to end. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of psychogenic pain. Until next time, keep learning and remember you're stronger than you think.
Absolutely. And it really highlights that shift in perspective that can make such a big difference.
It's like we're coming back to that idea of how connected the mind and body are. It's not enough to just figure out the psychological reasons behind the pain. We have to learn how to work with our bodies and use our minds to change how we experience that pain.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really important tool, self-compassion.
We touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth exploring further, especially when we're talking about psychogenic pain where there's already so much stigma and doubt.
Absolutely. It's all about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a friend who's going through a tough time. Imagine someone you care about tells you they're in pain. Would you tell them to just snap out of it or say it's all in their head?
Definitely not. We listen to them, offer support, and encourage them to get help if they need it. But we're not always so kind to ourselves.
It's funny, isn't it? We're often hardest on the person we should be showing the most compassion to ourselves.
So how do we break out of that cycle of self-judgment, especially when we're dealing with chronic pain?
It starts with being aware of it. Pay attention to those critical thoughts and ask yourself if they're actually helpful. Are those thoughts helping you heal, or are they making things worse?
So it's like being mindful of our inner voice and the stories we tell ourselves about our pain.
Exactly. And then we can start changing those stories. Replace those negative thoughts with compassion. Instead of thinking, I'm so weak for feeling this pain, try telling yourself, it's understandable that I'm in pain, considering everything I've been through.
It's about acknowledging that pain is a part of life. And it doesn't mean you're less worthy or capable.
Exactly. And remember, healing isn't a race. There will be good days and bad days. On those tough days, self-compassion is there to remind you that you're not alone and you're strong enough to get through it.
It's like being your own best friend, offering yourself the same love and support you'd give to anyone else you care about.
Well said. And having that love and support within yourself can make all the difference in how you handle the challenges of psychogenic pain.
Well, it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this really complex and fascinating topic. But as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with a few key things to remember. What were the most important things you learned about psychogenic pain?
The biggest takeaway for me is how connected the mind and body really are. We've learned how emotional distress can actually turn into physical pain, and how we can use the power of our minds to change how we feel pain. It's not a one-way street.
It's a good reminder that truly healing from pain means looking at both the physical and psychological parts. It's not one or the other.
Absolutely. And I think the other important thing is how crucial it is to feel understood and have compassion for yourself and for others. It's really important to remember that psychogenic pain is real and that people who have it deserve support and understanding.
It's about making the world a safer place for people to talk about their pain without being judged or dismissed.
Well said. And that starts with each of us questioning our own beliefs about pain and choosing to be more compassionate and supportive.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and insights today. I feel like we've all learned so much about this condition that so many people misunderstand.
It was my pleasure. I hope our listeners feel empowered to keep exploring and learning more about psychogenic pain.
And to our listeners, if you're struggling with chronic pain, you're not alone. There are resources out there to help you cope and find healing. Don't be afraid to reach out and connect with others. You deserve care and support.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and always believe in your ability to heal.
That's a perfect thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into psychogenic pain. Until next time, keep exploring and remember you're stronger than you think.